Joined by Rory Loy. How are you doing, mate?
Not too bad. Can't complain. All good. Just finished work, so looking forward to
Just want to start off by asking you what your early football memories are.
this. I grew up in Stranraer, so my early footballing memories were probably being ball boy at Stair Park, watching Stranraer play in the lower leagues of Scottish football and all the weird and wonderful, colourful language that comes with that. Sitting there as a ball boy, but no, some interesting times doing that, and then obviously growing up in Stranraer. Didn't start playing 11-a-side football really until I was maybe 14, 15, moving up further out of that. It was mainly a summer league I played in, 7-a-side. So that's my kind of early memories of kind of playing and being involved in football. And, the late 90s were the first time I remember the kind of successful Rangers side of the 90s was probably my first memories of watching football on the TV and getting caught up on the kind of the bigger stuff away from Stranraer.
So picked up by Kelly at 14. How did that opportunity come about for you?
So I was I don't think it was as young as 14. I think it was maybe about, I didn't move to Kelly till I was 14, 15. You're probably right, actually. Yeah, you know more about me than I do. There you go. So basically I was playing with, so like I said, I moved up, I grew up in Stranraer, and there's a road which runs from Stranraer right up through a place called Girvan, Ayr, and then obviously eventually hit Carlisle and then Glasgow. So I played for Girvan for one season, and then I did well and I was picked up by Ayr United. I played with them for a season and pretty much was picked up by Kilmarnock. So that kind of road, just kind of moved from one club to the next. So I pretty much get picked up by Kilmarnock through playing for Ayr United and just kind of making a name for myself in that general area of the world.
So then how did you end up getting picked up by Rangers? They obviously signed you for 20 grand at the time.
Aye, so Ian Durant was a coach at Kilmarnock when I was there, who he seemed to like me. You can generally get a feel for who rates you, who doesn't, or who thinks you're decent, etc. So I get picked up by Ian Durant, is what I would say. He moved to Rangers after a season of me being at Kilmarnock, and then I had another year on my deal, and then whether it was actually him or not, I'll probably never know, but I think he would have had a big pull in taking me to the club, because he was, like I said, a reserve team coach at Kilmarnock and would involve me in the reserve games and get me as close to the first team as possible in terms of training opportunities and stuff. So when he moved up to Rangers, I think he had his eye on me to take me with him, but obviously I had a year left at Kilmarnock, so it didn't transpire till the following summer.
And how big a step up was that for you going from Kilmarnock to Rangers at such a young age as well?
It's a big step up. I was signed, I think people think I was signed as a first team player. I was obviously signed as a youth team player. That particular move on reflection would probably be the one moment in my career that I would look back on and go, if I could have my time again, if I could have my career again, I would probably go back to that point in time. And I look at boys like, who were around my age at the time, Scott Arfield, for example, who had, I'm not saying for a second I would have went on and played the Premier League in England and had the career that Scott Arfield's had, but picking up 100 appearances by the time you're 18, 19 and being involved in big games at that age is a pretty big deal, and I think it puts you on the radar. I went from Kilmarnock to Rangers and get caught up in the system a little bit, is what I would say. Ended up there till I was 23. Loved my time there, and I had some experiences there that not a lot of boys will get, travelling to European fixtures and huge games, but it was a big step up. But I knew I was coming in for it. I played against these boys when I was at Kilmarnock, but I went in and more than held my corner in terms of the under-19 side, and then stepping up to the reserve side, more than held my own. It was a step up at the time, but one I fared pretty well with, I would say.
And how often would you have trained with the first team at that time as well?
So under Paul Le Guen, I trained with the first team fairly regularly. When it came to Walter Smith coming in, he carried a much bigger squad than Paul Le Guen did, so it was a lot more difficult to get opportunities round to train with the first team, and it was one of those where when you trained with the first team you really had to seize the opportunity and take the opportunity because of the standards and because of the amount of bodies that were there as well. So I did get plenty of opportunities under both managers, but again, it's difficult when you're training alongside guys, Stevie Davis, Pedro Mendes, Barry Ferguson, Chris Boyd, Kenny Miller. It's difficult to dislodge these players, to try and get an opportunity. And I ended up getting, 2 30-minute cameos. I probably didn't do enough in those times, but that just sums up kind of Rangers and Celtic. You work for your 8 years old, 9 years old, travelling the length and breadth of the country for a half an hour crack at the whip, and you've got to do something in those 30 minutes. But unfortunately, I didn't manage to do it.
You touched on it there. What was guys like Barry Ferguson like? Chris Boyd, Kenny Miller. What were they like every day in training? It's probably relentless every day.
Obviously high standards is what I would say. The 3 guys you picked, Barry Ferguson demands an awful lot of everybody all the time because his standards were so high in terms of not just his ability, but what he expected from everybody else. Kenny Miller's probably the most, people talk about Kenny Miller. For me, a lot of people remember Kenny Miller as when it comes to the national team, as a workhorse. Even with Rangers to some extent, a workhorse, but he's one of the most underrated players I think I've ever seen. I mean, in training, you're dealing with guys like Pedro Mendes, Barry Ferguson, and Kenny Miller. Football brain-wise, intelligence, his movements in the small-sided games and stuff, he was unbelievable. And then obviously like your Chris Boyd, who you get your blasters and you get your ones that like to caress it into the corner when it comes to finishing, and he had it all. He just had an unbelievable eye for goal. So the standards every day were set, and if you didn't live up to them, then you were in training there the next day. So it's a tough environment and it's a tough school, but you've got to learn quick. And it was great to be around these guys and watch them train. I just stayed too long. Spent 5 years there, and it was just too long. I was never going to get an opportunity, and it was difficult. So I ended up leaving at 23, and I probably should have left sooner.
I think even training with them every day, though, that held you in a good stead for the rest of your career and probably lifted your standards at other clubs you've been at.
It's a good point. What it does is it gives you a foundation and a knowledge of the game, how to play the game, and how to play the game a particular way. And I think that held me in good stead, especially when I went down to England and played at Carlisle. I think I had a bit of an advantage. These guys are bled into teams as good athletes who are there to play Tuesday, Saturday. I think that the Scottish game is extremely underrated when it comes to technical ability in our younger players. I think if you look down south, yes, they've got good athletes and they've got boys. Obviously, when you reach the top end of the English Championship and the Premier League, you're talking about, there's a big difference there. But the level I played at in League One, there's almost like an opinion of the Scottish game that it's not very good and things. But when you actually look at the understanding of the game, the technical ability of the boys down there compared to up here, I think we're better, and we don't get enough credit. But it certainly stood me in good stead. That foundation, that knowledge, that education of football, which you pick up at the likes of Rangers and Celtic and other clubs as well. Falkirk, a club I've been involved in, and I watch how they work with our youth players and our youth teams, and you pick up a great foundation to build a career on.
You spoke about it a wee bit earlier. Obviously, Walter Smith gave you your debut at Rangers. Obviously, devastating what happened to him. Just firstly, what was he like as a man, and secondly, as a manager for you?
Look, I mean, in terms of his achievements, you could talk about him all day long. But I think what's quite apparent is when anyone talks about him. I heard Derek McInnes talking about him, Stuart McCall, Barry Ferguson, Ali McCoist. Very rarely are trophies mentioned or achievements. It's all about little moments. Derek McInnes talking about how Walter Smith stood with his dad and spoke to his dad while he was doing his medical. Ali McCoist talks about the memories and different things they did, and Stuart McCall talks about the memories after the cup games and stuff. Talk about him as a person and as a man, which is kind of, to me, brought home just how big an impact he had on so many people's lives. Never mind lifting silverware, which is great, but people remember how you treat them, and that is the biggest message I've got from all this. But in terms of the impact he had on me, I must say, growing up in the 90s and getting into football in the 90s, in a place where it's not the Goldfish Bowl of Glasgow. It's not Rangers versus Celtic. It's not. I grew up in Stranraer. Some of my friends chose to support English sides as passionately as people would support Rangers and Celtic up here. So it was his side in the 90s which got a generation of me and my friends, growing up following Rangers. And we picked that based on watching them and enjoying how they played and the way they played. It wasn't anything to do with, my family weren't even football fans, never mind Rangers or Celtic fans. So he had a huge impact on my childhood. And, when he passed the other week, I'm getting messages from friends from my childhood, talking about times where we sat and watched games together and did different things together. And then obviously you move forward into the next part of my life, and him giving me my debut, something I'd worked so hard for, and watching how he managed people around the place and just how he was as a person. So he had a huge impact in my life, both as a kid growing up, falling in love with the game, and also having the pleasure of being able to work with him for a period of time.
Now, surreal for that, well, for you, was that the fact that you've grown up watching him managing the team you support, and then eventually Walter giving you your debut?
I think I think when you're growing up, it wasn't necessarily so much my debut, but I think what happens when you're growing up, my hero is Brian Laudrup. So I'm watching the likes of your Laudrups and McCoys and all these guys, but at 10-year-old, you think these guys just go out in the pitch and play football like you do down the pitch. You don't realise there's a mastermind behind it all. And I think as you get older, you then realise there's a manager there who manages these guys. And then when you see how he does it firsthand, you get a newfound appreciation for the man. And like I said, I've seen him give out the hairdryer treatment a few times. But his relationship with his players, these guys would get it rough if they weren't performing on a Saturday, but then coming on Monday, they would be sitting chatting to him, and he would have his arm around them. And people, there's a generation now who think that man management's a new thing, and all these buzzwords that modern managers use, and you only need to look at him and how he was to realise that treating people the right way and man management skills are things that have been going on for years, and he is an advocate of that. And like I said, such a sad day last week, but people are remembering him for all the ways he should be remembered, which is him as a man, as a human.
So like you say, you were at Rangers for 5 years, loads spells at Dunfermline and St Mirren. What would you say the main benefits to them were for you?
The main benefits of Dunfermline was just being in and around a first team on a daily basis and being part of the playing squad, and expectations set on me, and it being all about the 3 points, going for promotion at Dunfermline and doing as well as I could to try and stay in the team, with fans on a Saturday who are expecting big things. There's a pressure there, you're coming on loan for Rangers. 18 appearances, 3 goals. I played a lot of my time on the left-hand side, which I didn't particularly enjoy at times, but Jim McIntyre was great in terms of communication and bringing me in and treating me as one of his own players, which is big, because I think if you're on loan, then what can happen is you almost feel like you're just on loan. But he was great in making me feel part of the team and part of the squad, and I still talk to boys from my time there. I loved it, I really did. And I was young and inexperienced and probably should have played more games, but at that point, confidence is quite a big thing. And but that was great. The St Mirren loan spell was a total waste of time, absolute waste of time. It was borderline shambles, to be honest. I should never have went there. I should never have been asked to go there, and I should never have been there, because the manager at the time had absolutely no intention of ever playing me.
How did that come about then, if he had no intention of playing it?
So at the time, you needed to have a certain amount of under 18s, over 18s, or under 19s, I think. Or there was a stipulation in place where you had to have so many underage players on your bench or in your matchday squad. So at that particular moment in time, he was having to sit 15 and 16-year-olds on the bench. So effectively, he looked at me and went, well, he's a better option than what I've got, but he's not a better option than what I'm playing. So I went there and never played. And that was pretty much. Don't get me wrong. I was too young to question it, and I was too young to maybe stand up for myself, and too naive.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say I couldn't have went there and maybe done more to try and get into the team, but I look at my time there and I think, did I train particularly well at the start? I probably did fine, but my confidence went downhill very, very quickly because I wasn't being picked. I wasn't playing. I didn't feel part of the team. I didn't feel part of the squad. You know, you're not playing any minutes. Your performances in training, you know, I wasn't. Andy Millen was brilliant, I must say. I loved Andy Millen. And I've nothing against Gus McPherson either. You know, he's out there to win games, and they were in a relegation scrap, but maybe could have did a little bit more in terms of his communication. I did approach him a few times to try and speak to him, and you know, kind of false promises and things, but it just didn't work out. It was just a waste of everybody's time, really. To be honest, I don't think, you know, in hindsight, I should never have went, but I think in hindsight, Gus McPherson probably wouldn't have taken me the way it worked out. But these things happen in football, and like I said, I don't hold any grudges. Gus McPherson did what he felt was best for him and his club at that particular time. So, as I said, I don't hold any grudges. But I mean, there's no denying it's clear as day it was a waste of time.
That's crazy. The fact that the Rangers don't know that at the time, or I presume they wouldn't have been told anything of the sort.
Oh, listen, I mean, but listen, on the flip side of that, I've got an opportunity to go out to a top tier club and try and play some games and play some football. And I started I came on at Easter Road and did fine on the Saturday. I think I'd signed on the Friday. I played half an hour, but then I was out of the team for weeks and weeks, and I wasn't doing enough either to merit a start in training and things. But I do think when you've got a young boy on loan at that age, you need to communicate with them, and you need to tell them. You need to try and integrate them into the team and make them feel part of the squad and stuff. So there's another lad there, Graham Carey, who actually scored against Roma a few weeks ago, believe it or not. So he came on at a similar time. And what didn't help me as well is I came on loan for Rangers, he came on loan for Celtic. I think 3 of the first 6 fixtures or something ridiculous were against Rangers. So they drew in the cup, then there was a replay, and they happened to play them in the league. Now, Graham Carey had sat on the bench for a few weeks as well, but he went to Ibrox and was on the bench, and I think it was Stephen Robb at the time get an injury in the warm-up, so Robbo didn't play, and Graham Carey he's left-sided. He get the call up, and he scored a free kick, and that's football. It can change in an instant. So he ended up getting a run on the side. He scored a few great goals against one of them against Hearts, sticks in my memory. So listen, I could probably have done more, but I think on reflection, the club at the time, the manager, and myself should have made more of that situation.
So after your return to Rangers, you ended up leaving. How did that come about? What was the sort of process of leaving there after being there for 5 years?
So basically, when it came to leaving, we'd played a bounce game against Carlisle United, because they had one of their centre backs coming back from injury. So you know, Glasgow's a stone throw for Carlisle, really, an hour and a half. So they'd organised a bounce game. I'd scored a couple of goals, I'd missed a penalty as well. But I'd scored a couple of goals in that game, and I knew they were looking for a striker. So, you know, my agent basically reached out to the manager there. The manager hadn't been there, but the assistant, Graham Kavanagh, he had a really good career down south in Republic of Ireland. So he was at the game. So they took me down on trial for a week. So I went down there on Monday to Friday. But before I went down, my agent basically said to me, look, why don't you go to the manager at Rangers, it was Walter Smith at the time, and say, look, I think we were playing St Mirren at home and Inverness at home Sunday or Tuesday. He said, why don't you go and just say to him, look, throw me in for a couple of games or give me some minutes. Let me walk out the door knowing that I wasn't good enough, rather than, I might have been, because I was a goal scorer at that particular moment in time. So, you know, what was asked of me was to score goals in the reserve side, so to try and take that into the first team. So I went and had a conversation with Ali McCoist and said, look, you know, throw me in. But it never worked out, which was fair enough. And they were honest enough to say, look, I don't think it's going to happen for you, which, you know, you can't argue with. You know, all you want is honesty. So they were honest enough to say that. So my options were to go on loan to Cowdenbeath, who were bottom of the championship, or go down to Carlisle on trial. So I went down on trial Monday to Friday, and they offered me a deal on the Friday. I ended up moving on, but no, listen, my 5 years at Rangers, I probably did stay too long, but some of the memories and some of the games I was involved in, and all the guys in the changing room, all the guys we've mentioned, and everybody I met there, management staff, everybody, coaches, they were all brilliant.
You say that you think you stayed too long. Do you think it's difficult to leave the sort of comforts of the old firm?
No, I think it's difficult to leave because it's what you've chased since you were 7, 8 years old. So it's difficult when you've chased a dream for that long and you've worked as hard as you have to give up on that and walk away from it.
Yeah.
So I think that's the hardest part. But it comes a point where you go, do you know what? This probably isn't going to work out. And with age comes maturity and a more sensible, grown-up way of thinking and things. So I left and I ended up leaving in January, and lo and behold, it all kind of came crumbling down for Rangers 6 months later. And I probably would have got a run in the team in the third division the following season, but who was I to know that was going to happen? So I moved on to Carlisle, but I couldn't say any better things about the people who I met and were involved with when I was at the club.
What would you say the main differences between Scottish and English football were when you went down there?
Attention to detail. See, up in Scotland, you see, Ross, what I would say is that you've got time to analyse teams, to sit down and have proper sessions on how you're going to play, how the opposition is going to play, to work on patterns of play. See, down in England, I mean, there's 20, I think in League One, there's about 20 to 24 teams in the league. I played with Carlisle, where if you're got an away game, you can be on a bus for 8 hours. You're playing Saturday, Tuesday. There's that many teams that you don't have for example, if you're playing Hibs 4 times a season, you can sit and you can meticulously plan how you're going to play against Hibs or how Hibs are going to play against you. And you're playing teams twice a season and you're playing Saturday, Tuesday. There's not that time to put in the attention to detail.
Right.
So the biggest differences I would say is the approach, in that you need to be athletic down there and you need to be fit and you need to be able to play week in, week out, twice a week. Whereas up in Scotland, and I'll go back to, I think the upper echelons of the Championship and the Premier League, but they're obviously different because that's a different breed. That's top level players. But the bottom end of the Championship, League One, League Two, for me, I think that there's a lot of athletes down there, but I don't think there's a lot of footballers. Whereas up here, I think that the biggest difference is probably attention to detail at this level.
You're not actually the first one that said that. I had Stevie Lawless on as well, and he says that when he went down to Button, he kind of felt like everyone there was like built machines and just absolute runners, whereas he was the more technically gifted one, and it didn't really work in that league, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. One of my good friends, Kane Hemmings, plays for Burton, and he, he's had success in both England and Scotland. I thought Scotland suited him. He was, he had a few problems using knees when he was younger, and not that demand of playing every week probably helped him. But he would probably be a good one and an advocate of how good the Scottish game is. Not compared as in it's much better than League One, but it's different is how I would describe it. The little and large partnership still reigns supreme in these leagues down in England. You get one tall striker, one little striker, and you one's expected to hold it in and one's is expected to kind of buzz around. And so Lee Miller, for example, was the big guy, I was a small guy when we were at Carlisle, and that's kind of how it worked. Whereas up here in Scotland, I feel like that's not really used anymore. There's more in-depth preparation in how you're going to approach a game, rather than it just be right. Lee's job's to hold it up and my job's to kind of pick up the seconds. So but again, Carlisle was good. I enjoyed it, and it probably made me into more of a man for the first time, is what I would say.
A bit of a tough first season, obviously breaking your leg. Just how difficult was that for you?
Listen, this is football. So when I went down to Carlisle, I'd signed in January, and the manager had said to me, Greg Abbott, he was a great guy. He said to me, "You're going to be in and out the team. I've got a settled team." And at this point, they'd just beaten Huddersfield 4-0 at home in the first leg of the Johnson's Paint. So they were going to Huddersfield in a couple of weeks' time with a chance to get to Wembley. And he said, "Look, I've got a settled side. We're doing fine in League One, probably batting above our expectations. They're not expected to get playoffs, but they're not expected to get relegated. I think they were sitting about 10th, which was pretty good." So I did exactly what he said. He said, "Listen, you'll be in and out the team." But when we were sitting talking about our contract negotiations, he said to my agent, "Look, I was on a pretty modest wage at Carlisle compared to most of the other boys." And he'd sat down and said, "Look, we need a striker. We don't know a lot about Rory, but we've liked what we've seen in training for the week he was on trial, this is what we'll give him, but if he can make 25 starts for the team next season, so not in the January, so the January season finished January the summer, and then the following season, if he can make 25 starts, we'll sit down and we'll talk about a contract which would put him on in line with, the higher earners at the club.
Yeah.
So he was right. I was in and out of the team for the remainder of the season. I think I'd made 8 or 9 starts, so he was true to his word. I had a cameo appearance at Wembley, which was an amazing experience, and we won the cup, which was great. Moves on to the following season. I don't start the season. He starts with kind of the bulk of the squad that had finished the previous season. But I break into the team pretty early on with a terrible result at home to Notts County. I think it was first game of the season. So break into the side and running out Boxing Day 2011, thinking this is my 25th start. I've played every single game. 9 minutes in, broken leg in 3 places, out for 13 months. So again, all you can ask for really is honesty. And the manager pulled me in and says, look, we can't talk about a new contract at the moment. We're not a club that are in a position to be able to hand out a contract to somebody he said, we'll give you a year's extension, but we can't really talk how we would have been talking, because I did really, really well. I was playing on the left wing at this point. JP McGovern was on the right wing and Lee Miller was up front. So it was like, we were kind of branded the Flying Scotsman, the 3 guys up front. So we'd had a really good season up to that point. Really, really good. And then that ended my, that wiped out 2012 for me. I was out for 13 months.
Was that, did you not really come back for that down there? Was that kind of your chances limited once you came back?
Well, I mean, I came back. I didn't sign the extension because I thought, no, I'm going to try and get back and earn myself what, I don't mean earn financially, I just mean like earn as in do well enough to merit the contract that I would have had. And I don't just mean again financially, I mean, security wise, you want a 2 or 3 year deal because you want security in your life. Everyone does. And you're no different as a footballer. And that's hard to come by in football. But listen, I came back and I made my first appearance. I think it was the January, the 2013. I actually had a really good run in the side. So what had happened was he started playing me left wing again, and I'd scored 3 goals in 4 games, and I was like, this is amazing. I'm back, I'm doing well, this is great. So what had happened at the time was Matty Robson, who was the left winger, he was injured. And again, I go back to, you need to play Tuesday, Saturday. So at that point in time, I've been out for 13 months. My body just wasn't up to it. So I started doing really well, and then I needed to be taken at the team, but he didn't have, at that point, we were actually down the bottom of the league. Matty Robson wasn't back fit again. And I came back, first 3 or 4 games, did great. And then I tailed off for 5 or 6 games and kind of fell out the team around probably about the March time. Matty Robson came back. Season ended and they decided not to offer me a new contract. So I was surprised at the time. I think everyone was. I think I'd done it. I felt I'd done enough to get another year at least to see how things would work out, given how unlucky I'd been with the injuries and things. But they decided against it. But again, a little bit boring, no controversy or anything. But I had a great 2.5 years down there. Other than the injury, obviously, to the playing side, but met some fantastic people and loved it.
So what options did you have then once you left Carlisle? Obviously ended up joining Falkirk, but was there anyone else sniffing about at that time?
No, nobody. Basically, my agent had said, look, you've been out for 13 months, you've come back, you've played a few games, but in footballing terms, you fell off the face of the earth, is how he put it. He said, don't expect a phone. And again, this is why I've been through a few agents who promise you the world and, think that you want to hear what, they tell you what you think you want to hear, but it was refreshing. He went, go and enjoy your holiday, switch off, do what you need to do, but don't expect a phone call till, the back end of summer. And when you do get a phone call, expect to be going on trial somewhere. So I went on trial with St Johnstone for 2 weeks. Didn't get a contract there. So I was standing in my room, in my living room with a football, ready to go down Glasgow Green and get a kickabout and get a bit of fitness work in, when I got a phone call to say, look, do you want to go to Forfar tomorrow night? Lyle Taylor's just signed for Sheffield United, Falkirk need a striker. I said, of course. Went up to Forfar, played that game, played a couple more games on trial, and then ended up signing for Falkirk.
Gary Holt signed you at that point. How was he to work under?
He was great. I think we had an extremely young dressing room at the time. and he was great with the younger lads in terms of he was very measured. Is how I would describe Gary Holt. Didn't get flustered when things weren't going well, and he didn't get overexcited when things were going really well. And I think that was a good grounding for a lot of the boys. And I think younger lads. I mean, the day I walked in on trial, I thought it was a crash. I thought I was training with under 18s, and then they got the balls out and they could proper pop them around. Will Vaulks, Conor McGrandle, Stephen Kingsley, Craig Sibbald. So these boys could play, so it was good. Really enjoyed playing with them. It was a good 2 years, I must say.
That first season was brilliant for you as well. You was lost in the playoffs against Hamilton, but you obviously top scorer, several Player of the Year awards and stuff. How was that for you?
It was good. Unfortunately, Kane picked me to the league's Player of the Year, and he doesn't let me forget about it. But no, listen, it was good. What helped me was people didn't really know how I played, and in Phil Roberts we had somebody who could really pull defenders around, and it gave me a bit of space. And I don't think people appreciated. I was known as a kind of goal scorer when I was at Rangers, and then going down south, kind of fall off the radar in terms of Scotland. So I don't think people appreciated that I could actually play a little bit. And Phil gave me room and space to do that. And I just worked as hard as I could for Falkirk as well. And again, the boys in the team, they were excellent. Jay Fulton as well, so creative and so clever. So they created chances for me, and I managed to tuck 24 of them away that season, which was great.
Brilliant. And what was it like in the Championship when Rangers, Hearts and Hibs ended up coming down as well? That, in my opinion, I don't think that'll ever happen again. That was just absolute madness.
It was. No, I think you're right. I don't think it will. So it was good in one sense, but it was bad in another sense, because I felt we had the squad to win that league in normal circumstances. So we'd had a season at it. We'd finished third, 3 points behind first. We'd been knocked out in the semi-finals, the playoffs. The following year, that with that squad we had and how young they were, that really suggests that the following year could potentially be a year we could go and get promotion. So to see Hibs, Hearts and Rangers in that league made it very difficult to achieve that. But look, I think we got to the Scottish Cup final that year. I think we finished fifth. Queen of the South had a good side that year as well. But we went to Tynecastle in the January with a great result. We ended their unbeaten run, beating them 3-2. We won at Easter Road. We got a draw at Ibrox. So we competed with these teams. So it was a great experience, and testing yourself against some of the best players in the country, despite the league you were in, was great.
You spoke about it there, the Scottish Cup final. What was that experience like for you?
Still, when you see that time of year flashes up and you hear about the Scottish Cup final and things, listen, it was heartbreaking. It was. It was 2 years I'd worked with these guys, and I knew I was leaving, so that would have been the icing on the cake. And I think to lose in the manner we did was the only word I can really describe as heartbreaking. We went into that full of optimism and full of hope, and we knew we had the team to do it. But on the day, it didn't transpire that way. So, we gave it our best, and what a run we had that year, but couldn't quite get it over the line.
As a player, do you look back on that in hindsight as it being a brilliant achievement you got there, or just with sheer disappointment?
Disappointment, I think. I mean, it is in the cold light of day. I suppose if you're going to analyse it and look at things logically, then it is a good achievement. But I think you want to win things in football, and I think once you're there, you want to win it. So the overriding emotion is disappointment, without a shadow of a doubt.
Manager at that time, Peter Houston, how was he?
He was great. He was a little bit more old school than Gary Holt. So James McDonough would take a lot of the training, and Peter Houston would deal with any nonsense and sort the boys out. But no, he was good. He was great. He was like a father figure. Boys could chat to him. You could have a laugh with him, and he wasn't dissimilar to Walter Smith in the way he approached things and how he conducted himself around the place and how he was in his relationship with players. He was great. I loved working with him. I really did. He was a good man, and he was great for Falkirk as well, taking them to a Scottish Cup final, taking them to a playoff final. Had a lot of good times there, Peter Houston and James McDonough. He was great, and Alan Maybury. The whole coaching staff there were great. But it was good to work under Peter Houston and see how he worked and operated.
You signed a pre-contract for Dundee. What made you want to leave Falkirk after such a successful season?
It's not that I wanted to leave Falkirk. I think it was more that I felt that I was, age-wise, I was then 25 and 25, 26, and I'm thinking, well, if this was 3 or 4 years ago, I would happily have stayed at Falkirk. But I think Dundee had offered me a 3-year contract, chance to play Premier League football. I just felt, and in the back of my mind, Ross, I'm thinking, if I sign a year's contract at Falkirk, which I would quite like to have done, just to have a crack at it, I kept replaying that injury at Carlisle in my head over and over again and thinking, I'm crazy to put that at risk, and security for, my son, security for myself, financial security, security to be involved in the game for another 3 years. And I suppose I was massively influenced by that, but also with the excitement of the idea of joining Dundee and joining a massive club and playing in the SPL, and some of the signings we were making at the time were great. So there was a number of factors, but the urge to leave Falkirk certainly wasn't one of them. I loved my time there, and had they got promoted, I absolutely would have stayed there. But it just felt like the right thing to do at that particular time for a few reasons, which, again, possibly weren't even football related.
The two main sort of pulls for you were the fact that it was a 3-year deal and for another crack at the Premiership.
Well, I hadn't played in the Premiership, so it was a chance to play in the top league, but also my age. Like I said, I wasn't 21 anymore. I wasn't, pushing through. I wasn't able to give up. I didn't feel another 2 years of my career to play at a level that I was being given the chance to play in the Premier League in Scotland. I didn't want to sacrifice another year or two of playing in the Championship. I wanted to have a crack at that. And again, I would have been more than happy to do that at 20, 21, 22. I just felt like I owed it to myself to have a shot at it, because I was 25 at that point, 26. I had played 2 years in the Championship. I got into a Scottish Cup final. It just felt like the natural progression, is how I would put it.
Just for your opinion as well, because I hear this sort of argument all the time, it's the fact that comparing the bottom six to maybe like the top four of the Championship, how big a gulf do you think that is between those teams?
What I would say is you'll often find with the bottom six, they have a player or maybe two players that, if they were in the Championship, would shine like a beacon. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a difference there. I don't think it's a huge difference. So I look at the likes of Raith Rovers, for example, and I'll pick Raith Rovers because they've got a Dario Renata on their side. He's a match winner. I think he'll play in the top league in Scotland one day for sure. And I think that he's the type of player that can be the difference in a game or the difference in a match. So if the bottom six were to come down, if Dundee were in the league, you look at Lee Griffiths and you think he's going to bag a certain amount of goals that will probably see them get promotion. I watched Charles Cook and Hungbo play for Ross County, and they were sensational the other night. And you think these guys are the difference. And every team in that bottom six has got a sprinkling of one, maybe two players that you look at and go, they're probably better than the Championship. So I would say there's not a great deal of difference, but when push comes to shove, the bottom six of the SPL would probably find themselves being more successful in the Championship than the top six in the Championship, and vice versa. If the top six in the Championship were in the SPL, they would probably find themselves struggling more just because of that little bit of added quality.
And what's your best memories of your time at Dundee?
We had a good side and we played some good stuff. Probably the first 6 months there, I was doing really well, and we were playing a system which suited me, and I was scoring goals, and we were doing well. I think I'd scored maybe 7 or 8 goals before Christmas. So I probably the first 6 months, which was pretty pleasing from a personal perspective.
And going on loan to St Mirren, how did that come up, the fact that you were going to be leaving Dundee on loan?
So that was the year down the line. So, basically we'd lost a few games in the December after side for Dundee, and he changed the shape. Paul Hartley changed the shape completely, and he played Kane Hemmings up front by himself. And to be fair, Kane Hemmings caught fire.
Yeah.
He scored a ridiculous amount of goals, but not only was he scoring goals, he was playing unbelievably well. You couldn't take him out the side. So, Paul Hartley tried to accommodate me on the left-hand side. I was doing okay. I was never going to do amazing. I'd lost a yard of pace since my injury at Carlisle, where I played down there when I was playing left wing. So I played maybe 8 or 9 games there. I was taken out the team, which was fine. I could understand it. You know, you'd Greg Stewart, you'd Gary Harkins, you'd Kane Hemmings. If they're going to play that shape, then I'm going to struggle to get in the team. I'm not a lone striker. I'm not able to do what Kane does. But if you play me up front in the 2, then I'm going to score goals and I'm going to do fine. Then the summer came, Kane left, Greg left. I started the first game up at Ross County in Dingwall. We won 3-1. I scored 2, had a massive part to play in the third. And then a few games later, I was out the team and didn't play for 10 games. And I was just like, the first year I could understand why I wasn't playing. The second year, I didn't really get it. I didn't really understand why I wasn't getting more of a shot in the team. So I went and asked to go on loan. To be fair to the manager, he said, aye, that's fine. We'll get that sorted. I had a number of suitors in the championship who wanted to take me. I also had Carlisle who wanted to take me as well, but Dundee had said, look, if you want to go on loan, then we don't want you going to a club in the same league who are in and around us in the league table. So I plunked for St Mirren. They were bottom of the league at the time, rock bottom of the league. You know, Morton were up the top end of the league, wanted to take me. Queen of the South wanted to take me. Gary Naismith presented quite a strong argument in terms of Dobie was there. He wanted to play 2 of us up front. Jim Duffy had said, look, I think they were second in the league at the time, but just felt I had some unfinished business at St Mirren. So, and so many people said such good things about Jack Ross that, you know, there was a number of reasons why it just felt right to go there.
Did you feel a pressure going there, considering they were in a relegation battle?
No, I hadn't been part of that poor form, and no, I don't think I'd felt a pressure. I personally went there with I wanted to prove to the supporters and the club and the fans and the people that I could play, and that I should have been given more of an opportunity the first time around, although it was a completely different era and things had moved on completely. I wanted to show them that, you know, I could do well, and I also wanted to be part of a success story. I just felt like if I'd went to Morton, realistically that year, were they going to get promotion in the long run? I didn't think they were. If I'd went to Queen of the South, the same. But I just felt like I could go to St Mirren and potentially play a big part in their history, because at that point, I think they were stranded at the bottom of the league. It was ridiculous how many games. I think they won 2 games. So I just felt like I could go there and be part of something. And it ended up exactly that way.
Scored the goal that kept them up as well.
Aye, fantastic day over at Easter Road. It really was, and aye, delighted to be part of that. And I played my playing days. I have a very modest career compared to a lot of people, but that one goal, you know, I played for St Mirren, you know, 2 loan spells over 6 months, but I still get people coming up to me if there's a St Mirren fan in a bar saying, you know, I played for Falkirk for 2 years. And don't get me wrong, if I was in and around Falkirk, I'm sure people would maybe say hello or whatever else. But that goal, the amount of messages I get and the amount of pints I've had bought over that goal is quite astonishing. Because to be fair, if they'd go into, you look at Falkirk, St Mirren went down to League One. It's a slippery slope.
Was there never a chance to go there permanently once you left Dundee?
Yeah. I mean, I could have went there. I could have went to. I mean, I had another year left of my contract at Dundee, and I just didn't feel right to be there anymore. Neil McCann was the manager, who was great with me. I didn't get the chance to work with him because I was keen to leave. So they said, look, you can leave again, but we don't want you. St Johnstone wanted to take me, but they didn't want me going in within the same league again. So ended up with Falkirk and St Mirren, who were keen to get me. And it was a difficult one. And people at the time went, oh, he went to Falkirk because the financial package. Well, that's not the case. Dunfermline offered me the best financial package to sign for them at that particular moment in time. It was nothing to do with that. It was to do with the fact that I couldn't separate them. Jack Ross was the manager at St Mirren. I knew him. I liked him. I'd worked with him. He was great. Peter Houston was the manager at Falkirk. I knew him. I'd worked with him. He was great. I loved my time at Falkirk. I loved my second period at St Mirren. I literally had nothing separating them. So I just felt like we came so close to promotion in my first year at Falkirk. We came so close to lifting a major domestic cup with Falkirk. And I just remember how disappointed everyone was that day. Then at St Mirren, we set out to achieve what we wanted to achieve, and the ecstasy and the the joy of the St Mirren fans at the Easter Road and in Paisley that night was amazing. And I just felt like I wanted to go back to Falkirk and try and get that little bit of success that I hadn't got there, but I had got at St Mirren. And that's ultimately the only thing that separated them, was I just wanted to get that success for Falkirk as well.
It would be a bit of unfinished business to try and get that success as well.
Aye, definitely.
And it ended up being a bit of a tough season. Finished 8th. What do you think that was down to?
I mean, the start under Peter Houston was difficult because we had the players, we had the coaching staff, we had the potential, but sometimes in football you just can't put your finger on it. And we tried for weeks to work it out. Unfortunately, the manager parted ways with the club. Paul Hartley came in and wanted to go in a completely different direction, and these things take time. So it went from start of the season, let's go and get promotion, to Paul Hartley coming in, and it was more of a transitional thing. He had ideas that he wanted to implement, which were never going to happen overnight. So it became difficult to then push for promotion, and we hadn't got off on the best start points-wise, clearly. And then, yeah, things just didn't really transpire the way the club had hoped. And these things can happen in football. And unfortunately, this was the case on this occasion.
You ended up leaving by mutual consent, going to Dumbarton. What made you go part-time at that stage of your career as well?
I wouldn't have said I left by mutual consent. I mean, the club didn't want me to be there anymore. It got to the summer. I had another year left in my contract, and for whatever reason, I was, the manager felt I was surplus to requirements, which is fair enough. He's the manager and he makes that decision. So I ended up moving on, and I had Barry Smith on the phone at Raith Rovers looking to take me there, and I had Stevie Aiken on the phone at Dumbarton, and I don't know. I just felt like I enjoyed my time at St Mirren, the loan spell, but other than that, I don't know. Something was maybe gone for me, which is quite rare, I suppose, in terms of playing and being involved in it day to day. And I just wanted to go down a different direction and look at other things. So Dumbarton offered me a job, but I just took a bit of a leap of faith with it all, and unfortunately picked up a really bad back injury at Dumbarton, coupled with the fact that they'd offered me the job on the railway, which I didn't really enjoy. And my career just kind of came to a close during that period because I couldn't get on the pitch and play because of my injury. And I just felt like my life had hit a point where I had to go in a completely different direction. So that's pretty much what I did.
At that stage, did you kind of fallen in love with football a wee bit?
I think that's fair to say. I missed a Saturday and I missed the buzz of the crowd and scoring a goal, but I didn't miss the day-to-day stuff, the Monday to Friday. It had all become a little bit mundane, is what I would say. And I just was ready for something else. I didn't know what, but I thought being at Dumbarton and giving me the opportunity to go and try something else would maybe present a platform to experience other things. Ultimately, that wasn't the one because I didn't enjoy it. However, I did enjoy my time at Dumbarton. I just didn't play because I was injured. And when I did play in those games leading up to my injury, I was pretty much 40-50% fit at best.
Yeah.
Because my back was really debilitating. So I would say so. But I never really got the chance to see if I would have enjoyed part-time football because I was never fit.
So I wonder what you're doing now, and in the punditry and the commentary. How did that opportunity come up for you?
I mean, it's something I've always been interested in because I enjoy doing it. It's an industry which I've always wanted to try and tap into to see if I would be good at it. Obviously, you've got to ask yourself, do people really want to listen to Rory Loy, who has had a modest career? But I think if you're passionate about something, you want to do something, you'd be cheating yourself if you didn't try your best at it. So I put a few feelers out when I first left Dumbarton, but never really heard anything back. So basically left and got a job at Sky, answering phones and things, which gave me a totally new perspective on different things. And then the back end of last season, a producer at the BBC, Douglas McNeil, just messaged me. And at the start, you're going, I'm not sure if this is an actual, is this a bam up? Is this my mate? I was asked on as a guest effectively for one of the shows because Partick Thistle were playing Falkirk. I was an ex-Falkirk player. Gary Holt was the manager. I used to play under Gary Holt. Can you come on? Can you work with us? Can you do the game with Derek Ferguson? So did that. Derek Ferguson was great. Doug McNeil at the BBC, who had kind of reached out to me, was great. Messaged him after it saying, look, I love that. See if there's any more opportunities, then amazing. Like, I'd love to do it. He asked me to do the Dundee Carlisle game, the playoff game for the Premiership first leg up in Dens. Did that. Then did that with Stephen O'Donnell. And then I was thinking to myself, there's now an 8-week window with no football. I hope I don't kind of get lost in the melee of no football for 8 weeks. So I gave it a week or two at the start of the season and then messaged Doug again to say, look, if there's any gigs coming up, then I would love to help or I'd love to do it. So he gave me a gig at Almonvale, Livingston against Royce Rovers in the Betfred Cup. And ever since that day, it's just snowballed and snowballed. I've been asked to do different things within the BBC. So it was just like fate almost. And I love doing it and I've enjoyed every second of it, I must say.
What is it you enjoy so much about it?
I mean, who doesn't enjoy talking about football and watching football? And I think I'd had a couple of years away from it and I was ready to come back in some capacity. I know I've got my coaching badges and things, but this just came up at the right time. But I enjoy challenging myself to, it's that idea of what do people want to hear when they're listening to a game or when they're listening to open all mics or when they're listening to a podcast. And it's trying to articulate people's thoughts and emotions and take that across so that people, you're almost being the voice of people and saying what they think or saying what they are seeing and stuff. And it's quite satisfying. It can be unnerving at times. And obviously in the beginning, there's a few nerves kicking around, but no, I just enjoy the whole experience of it all, I must say. And everybody I've worked with so far has been so helpful and so good.
And say if you get told you're covering a certain game during the week for the weekend, just how in-depth does your research have to be if it's maybe a team that you've not seen that season, for example?
Again, I think it goes back to what would you want to hear if you were listening to somebody, and it's not always stats and it's not always about players or research. It can be little bits of detail that people would like to hear that's maybe not connected to anything to do with recent form or recent players, etc. But I like to be in the know. I keep up to date with football, so covering Berwick Gretna was tough, for example, because you do need to sit down and do a couple of hours research, and that's no disrespect to them. It's just the truth. I do need to do a little bit, research. So a couple of hours on Gretna one day, a couple of hours on Berwick the next day, because at the end of the day, it's your job to go there and provide people with information who are watching the game. So it can be pretty in depth at that point. When it comes to the Premier League games that I've covered or the Championship games, I know a lot more about the leagues, so it's a lot easier. So you're just basically polishing up on current knowledge and just trying to get a few nuggets of bits of information that you feel that people might not know.
And what's your long-term aim in media in that industry?
To learn, to improve, to try and do as much work as I can to the best of my ability. I know it's a bit of a boring answer, but it's true. I very much believe that you've got to kind of do as well as you can and work your way up. And I'm more than happy to pour the teas and coffee, so to speak, and get a grounding and get a base to do as well as I can, so there's a longevity to it. I don't really want to be a flash in the pan where you come in for a few months and you kind of fall off the radar and things. I want it to be in that for the long haul. So it's just finding a way of working as hard as you can, reaching out to the right people and getting as much help as you can, and being proactive is what I would say, and improvement. So my long-term goal is to be involved in it as long as I can, but also understanding that you need to work hard to be able to do that.
Brilliant. If it's all right with you, we'll finish with the quick fire questions, Rory.
Cool, sounds good.
So, your best mate in football?
Well, I'm not technically in football anymore, but I'm going to upset a few people here, I think. But I'm very close with Kane Hemmings, as I've already said. Ryan McGeever's one of my good friends at Dumbarton, but John Paul McGovern is somebody since the day I met at Carlisle we've got on really well. So himself, he runs a cafe down in Burnside now called Gaga's, which I work in as well on a Wednesday. So man of many talents. So John Paul McGovern, I would say, but Lee Miller's another one who I was very, very close to during my time at Carlisle, and still speak to him all the time, but John Paul McGovern's probably my best mate in football.
Your favourite goal?
Favourite goal? My favourite goal was probably for Carlisle against Sheffield Wednesday. Now, my favourite goal has to be that one at Easter Road, I suppose. I was going to go with Sheffield Wednesday because I felt that was probably the first point in my career where I felt I'd introduced myself and I felt like a first team player. I felt like I belonged in that arena to score against a team like Sheffield Wednesday and to win that game. And it just felt like I belonged there for the first time. So that was a big one for me in terms of psychologically. But it's hard to come away from that goal at Easter Road, I suppose. The meaning behind it, what it meant for the club, the magnitude of it, the build up to that game. Everyone was expecting we needed a point. We went 1-0 down. The fans, the amount of fans in the stadium, St Mirren wise, the atmosphere, because Hibs were lifting the trophy that day. It's difficult to get away from that goal.
And also the amount of pints that it's got you on a night out.
Well, I don't have that many nights out in Paisley enough, so I only get one every few weeks in Glasgow, but I'll take them.
The best stadium you've played
in? So I've been lucky enough to have played in Hampden and Wembley. Played in a Scottish Cup final of Johnson's Paint Trophy. So I'll be patriotic and say Hampden. Obviously played at Ibrox and Parkhead, but to be fair, if I was to pick any stadium to play at domestically, it would probably be Tynecastle, to be fair. Fantastic atmosphere, it's right on top of you, proper football ground, and I loved playing at Tynecastle. It was really good.
The best player you've played against?
Oh, the best player I've played against. So we played, see when I went down to Carlisle, we played Southampton, were in League One at that time, and I look back at that side that day and I was starting that day and like your Adam Lallanas were on the bench. But Oxlade Chamberlain played that day and he ran the full-back ragged, absolutely ragged. And they ended up getting back-to-back promotions into the Premier League, but they were in League One when I was down there. One of the first fixtures I was involved in and started was Southampton away. I had to do my induction, so you just sign, you need to sing a song at the next pre-match on an away trip. So I ended up singing Robbie Williams' Angels and then going to play at St Mirren against Oxlade Chamberlain, Lallana and Ricky Lambert. But Oxlade Chamberlain stood out like a sore thumb that day. He was brilliant.
The biggest moaner that you've played with?
Paul McGowan.
That was an easy answer, that.
Paul McGowan, without a shadow of a doubt. He would moan. He'd argue with selling an empty room.
And lastly, the best five-a-side team of players you've played with and why?
So I don't want to be one of these guys that picks somebody that. So, for example, Stefan Kloss had a spell in the reserve team when I was at Rangers, when Alan McGregor was breaking through, and he was phenomenal. But I'm not going to pick the likes of him. I don't think a couple of appearances in a reserve game really count, or one appearance in a first team alongside somebody. So, goalkeeping wise, I would have in my five-a-side goals Michael McGovern. In an 11-a-side goal, he would throw himself in front of a train to stop a goal going in. So I would have Michael McGovern in goals, and then, or is it 5 outfield players you want, or is it 1 goalkeeper and 4 outfield players?
Go for 1 goalkeeper, 4 outfield, and you can include yourself if you like.
No, I don't think I will be. My back's just not up to it. So at the back, let's have a wee think here. So Will Volks played a lot of games at centre back when I was at Falkirk. I know he plays central midfield now, but I think he would be good for the five-a-side. He can spray it around, but he can also get stuck in and win a few tackles. So I'll go with Will Volks as one of my defenders. I'll just go with one defender. All out attack. I'll go a wee diamond. I'll go a centre back, two midfielders and a striker. In midfield, I would have. Let's think. Kevin Thompson, played with him at Dundee. Quite a few games, and he was different gravy for that level. Obviously had bad injuries and things, but he was a cut above, an absolute cut above. At the time we were at Dundee, he didn't play enough games because he was missing through injury and different things, but what a fantastic player he was. At Rangers, he was almost like known as the kind of dogged player who won the ball back and passed it to players that could play. But when you get to, when he came to Dundee, he could do that, plus the possession boxes and things, just one step ahead of everybody. He was really, really good. So Kevin Thompson in goals. Kevin Thompson in midfield, sorry. Who would he be alongside? Would probably have Falkirk's getting a good shout out here for my time there, but I would probably go with Jay Fulton. Again, in terms of his thought process and how he would do things, he would be able to see things where you would watch him and go, I didn't even see that pass, and I should have been there. So he'd play in an area, and I'm going, I should have been there, but I never even thought of that. And he was just a step ahead in terms of his reading of the game, his intelligence, and his execution, of course, which is vitally important. Not only do you need to see it, you need to be able to execute it. So I would probably put him in there, and then up top, I would have. Didn't play enough games with him, so I'm kind of being hypocritical here, but I came on. I made my debut. When I made my debut at Ibrox, I came on for Kenny Miller, and as I've touched on already, in 5-a-side games and just in general, he was unbelievable. So sharp, so unbelievably sharp with the ball, and that yard of space you need to get a shot away, and that little bit of movement that people underestimate so much. That when you're doing a passing drill or whatever in training, and checking off the cone to get that little bit, people are like, it's just stupid. Why did he was a prime example of why repetition and doing these things makes a difference, because he was a master at little movements to create a yard of space or to take a defender away to create. And then when the ball did come into him, a wee pop off to then get it again and get a shot away. Massively underrated. I know he played at the highest level. There'll be many people out there who think he's a top player, but when I trained with the first team, he would be the one I would watch. And he would be the one I would try to learn from. So I'll stick him in my team, because why not?
Not a bad team, that, is it?
Yeah, it would win a few 5-a-side games. I don't know about any other 5-a-side teams, but I reckon that one would be pretty competitive.
Definitely. Top man, Rory, thanks a lot for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time to do it.
No worries at all. Enjoyed it.